Okay, so some people might join as we go, but we'll get underway in the interests of time. So I'm really excited about this session today. I want to introduce you to David Slyfield. So David, he was a contracted performance planner for High Performance Sport New Zealand. He's worked with the campaigns of the women's 470 gold medalist Jo Alley and Olivia, you might know her better as Polly Parry. Also the women's BMX silver medalist Sarah Walker, the men's 49er silver medalist and later gold medalist Peter Burling and Blair Chook, and the women's K1 200 meter gold medal legend kayaker Lisa Harrington. And he's also been a support team member in the Olympic gold medal winning campaigns of Rob Wardell, Sarah Ulmer, Hamish Carter and Tom Ashley. So he stopped working on Olympic campaigns after Tokyo, and then since then he's been working in mostly corporate, but a little bit still in sport. So he's worked with Generate KiwiSaver, so forming their and coaching their senior leadership team. The New Zealand Sail GP team, he was a high performance coach. He's done a lot of mentoring with various CEOs, and with Fonterra, he has been implementing high performance teams, and he says he's worked with over 300 teams. I had to check that was 300 teams, not 300 people. So a massively experienced in high performance sport and building high performance teams and managing campaigns. The piece that I wanted to pick his brains on, which I think is most relevant to you guys today, is around his thoughts and experiences on being a mentor and how you build that mentor relationship. So to kick off the session, what I thought was I will do a bit of a Q&A with David, but if he says something that you're interested in, you're more than welcome to add in your questions, and we'll have time for your questions after I've exhausted my list as well. So I'll kick off. So David, if you could put your modesty aside for a moment for me, what would you say, what's your area of expertise or your super strength that you, in terms of the value that you bring to an athlete, to a that you're working alongside with, or a team?
Based on feedback from others, something that some people note they think is unique is that I say no to quite a few things. I suppose my view is that there's only a few things you can do with quality, and I know that I'm not smarter than other people, and I know that I don't have any more capacity than other people, so I just choose to do a few things very thoroughly and recognize that in doing so, that's going to take quite a bit of time. So if you're saying yes to a whole lot of people and then you don't do it very well, it doesn't feel good to me, and probably is not the best experience for them, whatever it is you're doing. And so then as well with that is then just, I see quite a lot of value, even though today you'll hear me talk a lot, in just listening and asking a lot of questions of other people, rather than or just recognizing in myself when I'm trying to prove my value or my knowledge or things like that to people, and that's got me in trouble in the past when I do that, and I slip into that mode. So yeah, it's just you're taking time, trying to do a few things well, but being kind to myself by saying there's only a few things that I can do well, and just starting the bar quite low for me and others, that okay, let's just see if we spend a bit of time together, or if I'm working on this project, I know some stuff or have learned some stuff and people have shared things with me. So I've got some things, and you obviously know some stuff, and you certainly know you and your own context really well. So let's just share some of the stuff and see if there's a value in that. So trying to focus on, I suppose, any project I do, whether it's currently in commercial sphere or in sporting sphere, just seeing it as a collaborative kind of thing.
Yeah. So when you're asking questions, what are you trying to achieve with that? Are you holding up a mirror to get them to recognize something in themselves, or just exploring to understand? Or
definitely at the start, no, that might come later with that holding up a mirror. Maybe that'll come later if need be, if things start to become apparent, but that's not how I'd start. I'm just genuinely seeking to understand and learn about people and know who they are, what makes them tick, what do they value, what do they want to get out of whatever it is they're doing, whatever their project is, what would they might expect out of others and things. So but it probably quite a bit of it would focus on the whole person, and sometimes I might ask questions that people wouldn't necessarily see related to sports or their business thing, but that gives me a good understanding. Sometimes the questions over time become a little bit more pointed as I start to notice some things that I might ask them things that might be provocative, but I wouldn't start a relationship that way because it actually is not trying to trip people up or trick them or hold a mirror up or do anything except for me to get to know them and see what it is that they are in, what's value in that what do they value.
So at the beginning it's just purely out of curiosity, it's the humble inquiry thing.
And so
is
that requires from them as well, just to let that requires a license to be able to do that, just to be able to talk, because people are used to transactional kind of ways of working, that we're meeting because there's got to be an outcome or a purpose, or there's something that there's trying to be achieved straight off. So the fact that you might say, let's have a coffee chat or more than one and just keep chatting, and then let's see where this goes, and after we've had a few and got to know each other, then let's just look at where there could be opportunity, or maybe there's none, because it's been many engagements, both sporting and commercially, that don't go anywhere because they're not the right fit.
Yeah. So you just set that up in terms of context, saying, initially let's just chat.
Yep.
And so you're trying to build that environment of trust where they're willing to open up, willing to share, willing to let you understand who they are and their story.
Yeah, it's not so much specifically trying to establish trust, but it will certainly help that. That's probably not the mindset I go into it with. It's like I'm generally curious, but if I understand kind of who you are and what your things are that you value, or that, we'll be able to tell whether it's going to be a good fit for you or me over time, just by talking about things that, So, and I'll learn things about you that might be useful later. But we're just talking to, and sometimes those conversations can be a little bit, it could, they might feel tangential. So, but they do establish a foundation of, just genuine inquiry about a person, what makes them tick, what they see the opportunities are, etc.
Yeah. So how do you know whether it's going to be a good fit or not a good fit? Like, can you give us some examples without calling any names out?
I don't think at the start. So what has happened in a number of engagements in different places, and again, I keep saying it's the same, whether it's business or someone might suggest that I might be a good fit with person X or so. And then we can explore that through some conversation and see if that leads to anything or not. And sometimes, so generally, if someone has suggested that, they've probably recognized something in me or something in the other party, or an opportunity in there that they believe, because they might have seen something else I've done that could be helpful. But as well as having knowledge or skill in that space, it's kind of come down to sort of the fit of us as people as well, whether this is a good fit. And if it evolves that way, it goes a lot better than some other ways where times when it's gone bad for me, it's kind of if it's been where my relationship has been in some ways mandated, it's kind of like, you need to work with this guy, or he's going to work with you too. So it's sort of been told, it becomes much more of the relationship has to work on mutual value. And I don't mean that financially, it's just that we both enjoy the relationship. We feel that we're helping each other get better. And yeah, I see people grow or so through that. So it doesn't work if it's mandated. It doesn't really work well if it's designed with a reporting, when I talk about mentoring, a reporting basis that I'm sort of reporting outwards. And I'll come to that later about where that fits in with trust. It does help if I'm introduced with someone who has credibility in that person or entity's eyes. When I say entity, if I'm going to work for a business, who says, this is David, he's done this and that, I've seen him firsthand do this. For a start, it might feel a bit strange how he works, but just trust him for a while, and then, take your time and evaluate after a few meetings whether this is going to be useful to you. So it helps if you're introduced, rather than having to try and establish your own mandate. I would say something I don't enjoy doing is having to self-promote and sort of say and establish my value to someone by saying, this is what I can do and what I'm good at. And, in being introduced with credibility, I've done a lot of research into high performance environments and things. So for the 2015 and the 2019 Rugby World Cup campaigns, I spent a long time in the All Blacks environment. So they really gave me a lot of access. So I could sit in all the team meetings and selection meetings and what have you, and travel, be ensconced with them in camp and things. But when Steve Hansen ges up and goes, I'd like to introduce this guy, David Slyfield. He's here to learn for himself, but he'll notice some things, and I've asked him, all he has to do in return is share that back with us. So please welcome him and treat him as one of the team. As soon as he does that, then it's not about me having to explain myself every time. So that's what I mean. If someone introduces you who the players or person or business respects, then it generally helps a lot. And as long as they don't overplay that, it doesn't mean that I've got a huge amount to live up to, simply that he's going to hang out, learn some things for himself, and he'll notice some things. And we've asked us, tell us what you notice after being here for a week.
Yeah. I want to come back to the research in terms of what you learned from both observing the All Blacks, but also from the conversations that you had with athletes that, went through and were successful with medal campaigns. I just want to pick up on, you said it's a bit strange how he works. Talk to us about why people would see it as strange, or what you're doing that's different maybe to what they would expect.
Because I'm hopeless. I have a bunch of little models that I might use, but I'm not consistent in applying them in terms of a set paradigm. Like I've got a friend of mine who's been successful in business coaching, and he'll always use, I use this McKinsey model of how relationships work, and I'll use this one from over here. I'm much more, let's have a chat, and then at various times little things will pop up that either I know that work, or I'll show them, often that how I see things in my brain. Occasionally it will be something from elsewhere. But that's what I mean. It's kind of a bit more of an ad hoc approach. There's a lot of times, and this would be more so in business than, you might have that initial coffee meeting and the other party is thinking, literally they'll sit down and say, what's your pitch? Tell us what your value proposition is and that. And I don't really think that's a great way to start a relationship, but I can understand their short time. So that's what I mean about they might find it a bit strange. We're just having a few coffees and figure out whether there's value in this. And sometimes it's, so on those campaigns, to use an example, and it would be equivalent to, I expect where some of the people are that you might be mentoring people on this call. So with Peter and Blair, the sailors, I started working with them when they were, I think people were still at high school. So it's 17, 18. And we just had a catch up because someone suggested that might be good. And I asked them a bunch of questions. And after that, I didn't really think it would go anywhere. And there were a few things that stood out to me that were pretty rough and ready, and a few things that were pretty cool about them. And we just agreed to stay in touch. And they, in terms of that conversation, I learned a lot and asked them what questions they'd like to know. So hopefully I shared a bit, so it was worth their while for spending 50 minutes with me. And then we just agreed to stay in touch, and they were pretty gung-ho about performing at the World Championships, and their target was in the top 16, which they didn't achieve. They were quite a way outside that. And so because it was a little disappointing for them, I just got in touch and said, it seems like the Worlds weren't what you'd hoped for. Would you want any help with the debrief? And so they were like, yeah, that'd be great. Can you give it a bit of structure? So you're sort of just building a relationship that way. But equally, if they'd said, no, we've got it in hand, I would have been fine with that. I wouldn't have kept pushing it. It was just seeing how open they were. So I connected the debrief back to a couple of things we talked about beforehand, like this might be some value in this, doing some reflection on that, making that a real learning opportunity for you. Yeah.
So if you were to sort of summarize about what are the aspects that make a mentoring relationship work? Like, what are the sort of foundational things that that you would pull out, in terms of coaching these guys as mentors? What's important?
Understanding that it's about, well, I feel it's about helping others with their growth, whatever they define that to be. And then, over time we'll be talking about what their objectives are, and what their purpose is, and what's this within sport and what's it without outside sport. Who are you? Who do you want to become? If you want to achieve these things, what do you think it's going to take? So we'll have conversations about that direction, but it is about then what they want. And if I look at some of the things they desire, and they're not aligned to, again, who I am. Like, I can think of one athlete who was quite young and quite starstruck about money and people who earned a lot of money in their sport and things. And that, I've worked with a lot of people who earn a lot of money, and it just doesn't really spin my wheels if that's what your desire is. It's like, if you're talking to me about how good can I become, then I'm really interested. So just saying there's no judgment on them. That's great. And I think they have been quite successful financially since then. Good. But recognizing it's about what they want, it's understanding whether I'm into that as well or excited about it. So would I be excited about this relationship? Understanding that over time, there's going to be some value in it that they need to see, because it's up to them to maintain the relationship, not for me to drive it over time. And I don't want that to feel pressured that I have to get runs on the board by doing things for them. But there is an expectation that over time, this is just not me meeting up with some person. And often in the past, they've been young people, like quite an age gap. To me, that would be a little bit strange if I was saying, I'd just like to have coffee with you all the time. And I'm twice your age or something. That, I don't know, maybe it's strange, maybe it's not. But it's kind of like there is something here, and us talking, even if it's that I'm not delivering things to you, I'm asking the right questions that help you figure out things. And remembering this may not be just mentoring athletes, often it's been coaches as well. So that's kind of what I mean in my view. And when it works well for me, and it seems to work well for others, rather than a forced relationship that's more about achieving certain outcomes, either at their end or, I've been mandated by a sporting body or something to tick off X, Y, and Z. So, yeah, sure, there'll be expectations amongst that over time that they're going to develop these areas that they need to become a complete human and a complete performer.
You've worked with some pretty amazing athletes, and you've talked a lot about, how you're asking a lot of questions. As part of your experience been in helping these athletes, is creating some penny drop moments or turning points or pivotal moments where they go, oh, I need to do something about that, or I need to change something? Or are there examples of that, or is it more of an organic progression?
So sometimes that can happen, At other times, I don't even know it's happened. And even after campaigns, I'll see someone say something or even read it that you might have been involved in, realize that they didn't even seem like a major thing or conversation to me, but to them, it was a bit more pivotal. So it's hard to know what, but it's also at times after doing all work, so it's more than just talking. Sometimes there's some work and structure and things put around it. It is also being able to, he said before, hold a mirror up. There's times when that's happened, and I've had to do that I've asked, there's one particular athlete I can think of where that needed to be quite brutal in order for it to be effective. But at other times, it's holding up almost a little graph of saying, hey, look, look back, or even these notes where we were talking about it a year ago. Look how much you've grown. Look how much now you can do and know and learn. And you haven't noticed that, but that's just your growth. And I'm not saying that's to do with me, but that's showing them how they're progressing. Because one of the biggest things that we probably underestimate, well, I can help people figure out where the gaps and weaknesses are and blind spots. That's part of it. But equally, it's as much about giving these people support, encouragement, and just letting them know at times when they do things well, even little small things. Hey, that's really cool. When you said that or asked that, I thought that was amazing. Why that's amazing. And often maybe a skill I have got as well is connect that back to why that matters in terms of performance or their pathway or journey that they wanted to get to, because that's going to be valuable later. And I can see you've figured that out, or you can do that. So I think, and so to jump into some of that research, we can look at that in more detail. The stuff with the medalists, people have a view that these people, and they put on pedestals, and often by young people, and imagine their lives are perfect and everything's great. But every one of them talks about a lot of shit they've been through and a lot of hard times. And the vast majority have had quite big periods of self-doubt. Not all of them, but a large percentage, way more, it's more common than not. So having people alongside them, family, coaches, mentors, or outside people who just encourage them and move them along and just show them the next little thing they might be able to do that helps them get back up over that disappointment or so. I think that's, we underestimate. We're always hunting for what's not good enough, what's wrong.
Yeah, funny. I was just about to ask about, when athletes are struggling, and there's a lot of talk about resilience and this bouncing forward. What do we learn from, going through that? And you're sort of starting to touch on your role in that process. Just wondering if you want to talk, what if it's a major barrier or a major setback? Have you had some of those, and what if you feel like they need more support than just you? Like, what approach would you take to that?
Yeah, well, look, more than just me, I'm not someone, I always am working as part of a wider thing, support network that people have. And quite frankly, so while I might either be, depends how you label me, depending on campaigns, how people want to, if it's a mentor, campaign planner, performance coach, generally these people have a lead coach who is their coach and their coach in their sport and who has the skills around that sport. And I need to recognize as well, it's not me, I don't understand any of these sports in depth. There are a couple that I know a bit more about because I might have done them, but never to a high level, but I've understood over time. But I just lost my train of thought. Go back to the question.
I was just asking about major setbacks and
yes.
your role versus bringing in other people to help.
So I would say remember the people that I work with might be in the cycles where they're going for an Olympic medal. So they're in that 4 years when they maybe have capability to give themselves the opportunity to win a medal. Probably half, about 50-50, worked with sports psychs. So I did training in psychology, but I never positioned myself as the sports psych for these people or think I have any greater skills than what just a general ability to listen and read people. But in terms of how bad it can get, if I share a couple of examples, and I know they won't feel that I'm talking because they've given me permission to speak publicly about this. So there was a cyclist, Sarah Ulmer, who won a gold medal in Athens, and people know her for doing that and know her for winning the Worlds that led into that in a few months before, and she obliterated the world record there as an individual pursuiter. But what people are kind of very shocked about is 1 year before that she quit, and it wasn't that she like had a hissy fit and said and stopped riding a bike for a day. She actually hung it up in the garage and quit, because she'd come to the conclusion that she would never be good enough, and that she'd done these things. She'd won Commonwealth Games medals, but she'd never got a medal at the World Championships, which in cycling is certainly rated way higher. No disrespect to the Commonwealth Games, but that's how they, there's all the best are there. And had been to the Olympics and had some misfortune in Sydney, but came forth and just didn't feel that her career was going to progress any further, and that she didn't have the confidence that she could actually, it was the effort she put in would lead to success. So in that environment, and it's mainly her now long-term partner, and who became a coach at that point because he quit his job and did that, but a few others around there, was just guiding through Sarah into saying, hey, well, if you just tried focusing on this, and this, and did this for this period of time, do you reckon you'd be willing to give it a bit more of a go and see if you can see improvement? So, it's helping someone completely reframe when they've decided they're going to go on a different pathway. But if she chose not to, if she said, no, I'm happy to say, I suppose the fact was we knew that she wasn't happy, that she felt frustrated, that she couldn't go there. So it's showing her a path forward. Yeah.
And was it chunking it down a bit for her so she could?
Yeah, she said she could operate that way for 9 months with this sort of focus and this dedication, and going, we'll do this, this, and this, and I'll prioritize myself over everything else, because that was one of the downfalls for her. She was always such a lovely woman, was always doing a lot for others. And so it's like, okay, this is going to be about Sarah and Sarah's campaign. So it's her getting over herself and saying, yeah, I need to be selfish here, and I need to base myself here, and I need to do this type of training, and this comes first every day, and all that kind of stuff. So but there was an agreement that, that would be sustainable for a year. Then after a break, to move on, she looked for a new challenge and went to road time trialing, which she could have been incredibly good at, but then had a major back injury that ended her career. So, but I mentioned there were 2 athletes, just to talk about how, and this one will illustrate just another example of that initial part of getting to know someone. So I was asked to come to the Winter Olympic program and share some things from the research I had done. And I knew also someone had told me there was going to be a guy there called Mike Dawson, who was a canoe slalom athlete. And they said, he's a pretty amazing guy. And I saw he was on the bill to speak. So I thought, this is going to be double whammy. They've asked me to come down and go to Wanaka. What could be bad about that and stay overnight for 2 days? But then also there's this guy on the bill that I quite like to hear, because people told me some cool things about him. And I was blown away by the stuff he'd figured out himself when he was literally sort of operating out of the back of the station wagon. And when I say that, his level of thinking or understanding about where performance comes from and how you might create it and what leads to getting the best out of yourself was quite mature. So I just let him know that I bloody really enjoyed listening to him, and we had a bit of a yarn and said, it'd be good to catch up. He was heading off to Europe, and I said, I will just catch up after your season if you want to. And when he came back to New Zealand, we caught up. He'd had an absolutely terrible season, completely gone appallingly in World Cups and World Championships, and lost all his funding. So now he was penniless, as well as and pretty dark on himself. But in that conversation, understanding what had led to that, and that there actually was another way he might want to do it, and would he want to do that, he sort of reset his journey. So it happened, and so in Rio he made the final of the Olympics, so top 10 best slalom paddler in the world. So it's a pretty impressive outcome, so yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of times about performance review. You mentioned you'd offered it to Peter and Blair, and with with Mike, do you have a structure to how you do that, or how do you go about supporting an athlete to kind of deconstruct and self-reflect and get some learnings out of experiences, whether they've won or whether they've gone badly?
Yep. So the thing I think that all sports in business and everything has in common, I talk about it that you're all in the same race. It doesn't matter what event or sport you do. And the race that you're in is to outlearn your opponents. And that's the same in business as or in sport. And you can even leave off the opponent's part, because in the end, if you want to become great at something, then it's about learning how to do that really, really exceptionally well. And so then part of learning is about understanding what's occurred, what was good about it, what wasn't, what led to that, what could you try to adjust, what do you need to retain. And so therefore, reflection and any of the action learning cycles or cycles that you might be familiar with will always be a part in there. It's just that a lot of people do that pretty superficially, in my view, rather than quite thoroughly. So in the review process, they might either have something in place already that my general go-to is working with anyone, and even in loads of business I work with now, they already had some sort of models and things they used. Great. I'm not going to come and tell you that they're wrong and we need to do it this way. We'll use your framework. But I might teach you a few things about it that will help get to hopefully some more helpful insights and get better improvements afterwards. So, but in a nutshell, if it was up to me, I would establish all the things that actually are working and what is leading to you being at this point at the moment. So what are the foundational things that you're already doing that need to be retained? Because often in reviews or debriefs, people are quick to get onto the stuff that wasn't good enough and the mistakes that were made, and that's quite it's quite a negative way of being. But also, it's the journey. The journey to excellence is from good to great, and you need to be clear about what's making you good, and then what are the opportunities to help you get to great. That's kind of how I see it. So we start with that first, and then if it's going to be we try our best to triangulate this, meaning that I think of a triangle as they have an internal perspective on what occurred, and actually they might have been in the event, they were there in the moment, they know, but then you want an external view and what was seen, what could people notice about you from outside, about in your competition or in your preparation. So, the coach would often be a lead person who's going to have some independent thinking there, but there were other team members that you'd want to get feedback from around how that, again, the things that are good and not so good. And then the third part of the triangle is data. So what are the facts? What are the things we can't talk away? So what do the numbers say? So you'll have internal perspective, external perspective, and facts. And if you've got those three, yes, we can triangulate somewhat the truth about where things are at.
Yeah. So one of the things that strikes me that's maybe a feature of how you work is that, you said about not just being superficial, that you dig and then you keep digging until, you've been really, really thorough. And part of the process that I've given these guys is helps them to be thorough in reviewing all aspects of an athlete's life. But then it's also, for me, it's having that courage to, when there's a little red flag or a little something, to having the courage to keep asking and digging deeper and deeper until you understand that thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a bit of it's a facilitation skill, but B, it requires a bit of courage, but also understanding what's the value in doing that.
And I think also recognizing in your process as well where the person is at and what they're ready to, the level they're ready to go with this. Because I've cocked up some relationships by pushing too hard, too early. And,
right.
They're not quite. So probably I've been really fortunate to see some of the things that represent the gold standard and how they do that, and trying to apply that too early in a young person's pathway
right.
be too overwhelming for them. It's like, oh shit, by doing this, he didn't even point them out, but I've recognized I got these 20 different things that are, and that's not really. So it's trying to meet where they are on the journey without letting them off the hook if they're. And so I suppose.
So how do you decide that? Is that a gut instinct thing on whether
trying to judge it?
pushing is going to be beneficial or
trying to judge it, but I've made mistakes, but I always try and establish what level they want the relationship to be. So like I was working with someone, this relationship didn't work out. So I made some errors in here and also a few things, but this person was where a lot of your people will be, like last year's school, and they have very high capability and quite mature for their age. So very high capability in their sport. This is speaking in the past, so you can't stop someone I'm talking about right now at that age. But after speaking for a long time, I asked them how they would like me to work with them. Would they like me to pitch this to you as, let's call them Michael for Michael's sake, Michael, for you as the 18-year-old, year 13, and who's an emerging athlete, or would you like me to frame it to you as if, because their desire was to become the best in the world, like how I'd be talking if it was a person seeking a medal or winning world championships or setting a world record? And they were keen on the latter, with a dose of, yes, but please still remember I'm only 18. So tried my best to do that, but probably that was even giving them giving me the mandate of how they want it was probably still too hard for them. So because then I was like, well, I need to point out where you're kidding yourself in a few of these things, if that's what you want, because that's what you've asked from me. So again, so there's judgment even within that, even though the person had given the license to do it that way. Because I've probably forgotten over time, when I work with people over time, the conversations can get quite forthright, and got to be careful with people early in their career.
It's that, and you touched on earlier that importance of the role of the mentor, of being in their corner, of being the encourager. Yep. And I guess it's a balance between being the encourager and being the person who helps point out the gaps.
So in the medal interviews, so these are, some of them are 2.5 hours long, some of them are.
Yeah, so tell us a bit more about what you did there and what you found out, and
and then I'll share with what led to like why we have this debriefing things. So my earlier career, I helped people with their conditioning, and then I was involved in a number of campaigns. So some of those have been successful, and people have won medals, and I've been around a bunch of people who've won medals in different disciplines and different sports, and so I'd learned some things. And then I'd also been with some campaigns that hadn't gone well, and I knew that they had some big gaps that even I could see, and yet so there's no point in trying to make these people fitter, stronger, or faster, because if you're in a campaign like that and these whole other areas of their world weren't right, when the best play the best at the Olympic Games, you're going to get found out. That's not going to be good enough. I can't make you fit enough to overcome any of that. So after 2008 Olympics, and I worked on some contrasting campaigns over those 2 cycles before, I had an agreement with High Performance Sport. Yeah, maybe there's just a few campaigns. If I work alongside them and spend time with them and see if we can help them figure out, what the opportunities are, and try and make them more robust and give themselves the best opportunity to perform at the Olympic Games, would you be happy to do that? And I was working in the America's Cup as well, so that was a halftime sort of thing. And it was over time. We worked through. I worked with a small handful of campaigns, but I recognized, I started to think about the campaigns that I previously worked with, and it occurred to me that maybe because these people, we all got on pretty well, maybe they were just similar people to me. So I'd seen a subset of performance because that was, people who I'd managed to form a relationship with, and so they represented a certain way of thinking and operating. And so the idea behind the research was saying, well, if I'm going to help people try and win medals, it'd be good to know about what people think is important in winning medals. And the best people to ask about that would be athletes and coaches. And I'd like to go and ask them. There's plenty I already know and around, and let's go and ask them what they think leads to success and what gets in the way. Not just people who've won medals, but I interviewed people who performed at the Olympic Games or felt that underperformed and hadn't won medals. And it ended up being, in terms of the medal count, there were 50 different people, and they'd won more than 100 medals between them. And they shared more than 1 million words, I think, when you add it up or put it through a word count on how to win a medal, and they were all transcribed for me. And after that, I then went on and looked at team sports as well. That was quite interested about team environments, and I spend a lot more time working in team spaces now. But all of those individual sports were team sports, because every single one of those people, one of the first things you learn is that no one gets there alone. And that's not to give credit to, well, there's support crew deserves credit, but I'm not saying it's about giving me credit. It's like they win the medal, they have to do the hard thing. They have to put themselves out there in front of the whole world, and they're the one who succeeds or fails. But everyone talks about the great relationships they had with key people in their campaigns. So that's one of the first learnings that you see, is that you change the paradigm from this is an individual sport and delivery, but in preparation, it's a combined effort. And in our combined effort, we have to make this person so robust that under extreme pressure and under testing, they can deliver what it is they wanted to deliver in the heat of battle. And that was the biggest learning that the All Blacks made from their 2007 campaign, which was unsuccessful, where they changed 2011. They kind of realized that they were not empowering the players to make decisions or become decision makers in the field of play. And if things start to go wrong in the field of play, it's only really them who can correct for that. So they learned to change the way they develop their leadership structures within their team, the way they're decision making, etc. And it's kind of the way that I work with people and I like working with the sports that are decision-making sports, the decision-making contests that, okay, so it's about actually making you figure it out and not give you the answers, etc.
Yep.
It's way more powerful when it's way more stickable when people figure it out for themselves, and way more stickable when people have that learning and take that into high-pressure situations.
Yeah, well, the way the Raise My Game process is designed that these guys use is the athletes hold the cards, the athletes do the talking, the athletes are asked what actions they want to take for the priorities that come out. The athletes own the development plan. So it's very much designed with what is the athlete we want to create at the end, that we want to get to at the end of this, and let's design this process in a way that helps build those competencies and qualities.
Fantastic.
So what else? Relationships with key people, making decisions under pressure, and you mentioned being robust under extreme pressure. Tell us more about that.
Okay, so in one aspect, so it's all very well to be able to be the best trainer or know all these things, but you have to be able to deliver it under pressure when other people, someone's dictating tactics to you, etc., or there's quick decision making required, etc. So you're not only preparing a performance, but you're preparing to deliver that performance under pressure. And if it's about the Olympic Games, then, well, you know, without trying to overwhelm people too much, there's going to be a millions of eyes on you and things, and it's there and it's then, and it's about you. And you need to be able to step forward from your preparation and be able to execute that in that moment. So part of the way we prepare them is exactly what you're saying, that you don't do things for them as support people. We don't do stuff. So you've got to figure it out, because you're going to be alone. Like, you know, some of the most evocative environments are the athletics and swimming, where they kind of lock you in a room or pin you. You know, swimming, they do that with your other finalists, and you're in the same room. And I've talked to people right at the start of my journey. The first Olympian that I worked with was a swimmer who went to Barcelona, and described the experience in that room and how it actually destroyed his performance. I knew he could swim way faster than that. He knew that too. And he showed it in the next event he did, where he set a PB. Because if he's prepared a great performance, the expectation is that you should be able to deliver that and deliver a PB rather than something 5 seconds slower than in competition. So what's actually happened there? That's again when the debriefing comes in. But so what I'm saying is preparing people for all aspects of that, but actually, when it came to Neil Armstrong needing to stand on the moon, he has to be able to navigate his way down the ladder and know how to put his helmet on and do all of things. And more than that, I mean, it sounds trivial, but he needed to be able to dock the lunar landing, especially when things went wrong as they did. And that's the sort of empowerment you need for people to be able to do that, have the confidence they can do that.
Mm-hmm. If
we do things for people, we'll give them solutions, and I've been guilty of this at times, then it's not actually helping them.
Mm. Mm.
Yes, sometimes they want you to actually do some stuff to take a little bit of load off, but long term, it's not a strategy.
Yeah. So what else? They talked about the importance of having key people in their team that they trust. You talked about empowering people to make their own decisions. What else came out of that research? What else is key to?
Tons. But so like that model that I talked about before, that so that in being in improving mode. So one of the biggest things is that the conversations around talent got quite interesting, because few people would recognize that they had some attributes that enabled them to be good at their sport, but most of them would challenge back to me about, well, what is talent? And I suppose if you've achieved a performance, it's kind of disrespectful when someone says, oh, that person's just talented or super talented or a freak, and they don't feel like that because they've done a lot of things that have enabled that performance. But but the actual discounting of talent, whether that's just attributing the performance to yourself, it's an ego thing, whether that attribution of talent or saying, I'm not more talented, likely to be more talented than the people I race against, let's keep saying in the Olympic sphere, that's actually a really helpful thing, because then you're going to go, well, it's actually up to me and what I do, not because what I've been given or a special advantage that I have. And so this mindset is actually really, really important. And it links to, if you're familiar with Carol Dweck, and so I met Carol, and I didn't even know she was in the audience when I was presenting on something with sport. And then she got up, and then we realized we were talking about identical things. So the self locus of that it is going to come down to a lot of what I do. And that's kind of makes you quite naked as a person too, because then if you don't achieve, it's kind of like, well, did I not do good enough? Rather than, blaming is easier when there's external things. But just actually discounting talent. And actually, in many of the people's backstories, the majority, they weren't actually the best at their sport when they were young or a junior. It was remarkable how often this person was the second best or somewhere between there and 10th. Good, but not great. And then they got the work ethic that comes with it. The person who was the best felt it came easy, and they started to try and protect their talent or a belief that I'm good, I can win races, I can do this. But then when other people worked harder and figured things out, they got bypassed. And so retaining that humility, it's actually helped when people are young and they're not the best.
Yeah.
There's so many athletes I could tell you about who's at school, Rob Waddell's rowing master told him he'd never make it in rowing anywhere. The guy won a gold medal. And there's a lot of people who told me the story about the person who told them that, you won't make it. And it's like, Joe Sullivan is probably the greatest in that category of number of knockbacks he had in his life and the incredible things that guy achieved, rowing and then across through the America's Cup.
I'm conscious of time. Questions from the floor. What are you guys curious to ask David about?
There's probably one more to close that loop, but then I'd love to hear others. It was so that when I asked every one of these medalists about what do they consider the key attributes of a champion are, and there was one person, and they'd won 5 Olympic medals, and 4 of them were gold, and they were across 5 consecutive games. It wasn't that they could win a lot of them, and they're not a New Zealander, by the way. They just said brutal honesty within yourself. And so that drives what I was saying about before, about trying to get people to a position where they're really honest about their performances, honest about their gaps, honest about, and also honest about when they've done well. So that's this getting to that level, which is fleeting for all of us, because we're never honest all the time with ourselves. We all tell ourselves a story as a mentor, as a coach, as an athlete. And so you're trying to help people get those moments of honesty. So that's sort of
Yeah, and that's related to humility, isn't it, as well?
And self-awareness.
Being able to let go of that ego and self-awareness, yeah. And those are, sorry?
And while setbacks are part of all these people's stories, there are a few people I've had who haven't had such significant life setbacks or performance setbacks, but it's actually easier to work with someone when they've come off the back of a big setback, because then nothing like a setback really helps with resetting and humility and going, oh, actually, I just made a fool of myself. I could either give up and go away with my tails between my legs, or we could look at doing this properly now.
Yeah, and some of those athletes that hit that point, like Sarah did, of do I give up or do I use this as motivation to go forward? You know, that moment of decision can actually be helpful.
And if stopping is the right thing for you in your career, that's the right thing for you. I'm not saying that, like, you know, we often hear about this persevere and I never gave up. But there are other people who stopped doing things like sport and went on and did amazing things in other places. And so it doesn't have to be that this is evaluating for you. Is this really, are you still excited about this? Do you still really want to do this?
Yeah. There was a person on this call, David, I think he's gone, but he made that decision to give up and then went off, had a family, started a career, and then got selected and
Wow.
has gone on to win medals and is still representing New Zealand in his chosen sport. So
fantastic.
But because when he came back, he had this amazing perspective that every day was a bonus and every day was, you know, something to enjoy for the experience of it. So
and Susie, sorry, I added that one part about the brutal honesty, but yes, I would love to hear questions from other people.
Yes, questions. Give people a chance to take their mutes off to actually speak. No, I must have been such a good interviewer, David, that I've asked you all the questions. Hang on, Brooke is saying, is your work similar to Dr. Richard Young's work?
Yeah, so Richard, I shared with him the first set of interviews that I did, because originally I started out, I figured out how many gold medalists in the last 20 years there were, which were pretty few, and I sought them out first and interviewed all of those in New Zealand. Back in those days, we have a lot more gold medalists now than we used to have, so that was an easier task. And then I shared with their permission the transcripts that he looked at for his word clouds and things, and so it's in the similar field, and Richard and I have collaborated on things. I did some work around people who came fourth at the Olympics, which was pretty fascinating as well. So yeah, so it has informed, and so some of that stuff will cross over. And the research, I'm always very self-directed. The stuff was actually from my understanding. I don't have it, I have no interest in publishing it or doing that. And even likewise when I went to teams, because I've been members of teams, and then I've studied teams internationally, you know, with the Tour de France, teams have been immersed in them, NBA, Major League Baseball, motor racing, like I said, the rugby, yachting teams and things. And so I've looked at all of that too. So it's normally the next thing in life that I'm interested in, that, or where I know I've got a gap that I could help others in.
Great. Any other questions? We've got time for probably one or two more if anyone's got any burning questions.
Yeah, so probably an answer back. Richard's quite a really strong, I think of Rich, he's very a systems thinker, and you know, he took not you know, there was some stuff we did together, but he did a lot of stuff himself that he's actually constructed into some sort of models and systems and things that people can apply and things. As I'm kind of a little bit more of an ad hoc guy. I start each new journey, maybe not in the smartest way, by just starting from scratch with people and working through and seeing which parts apply. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I like the fact that you're not sure what value you can add until you sort of know what gaps are there or what opportunities are there, and so as you get into that conversation, you are kind of identifying what might be relevant, what might be helpful.
Probably got one other thing for me in the model I work with that might be useful. So I spend very little time in the delivery space with athletes. Normally, if you're doing an event, you need your key person there who's technical or tactical or so your actual coach and things. So generally in most of these campaigns, I'll spend time with athletes as they're performing at quite high level competition, so I can see firsthand what goes on and understand. I may, like in every Olympics that I've worked with, I've gone the year before to understand all the venues and things. So I just know I can even visualize what the context is they'll be operating in. But I don't go to the Olympic Games with them because I see this. I'm trying to help them develop so that they can do it without needing myself or someone to do that. They just need the core team who might be coach, physio, the people who are going to add value in the moment. So I'm not in the delivery space. And that I have been around a number of people who see their gold medal as a support person about being in that space, to say I was with them when they won their medal and things. And that's not really, I think that's the right place for me. And I don't think it's the right place for a lot of people. I challenge people in that space. Do you need to be there? Is it about, and if you feel you need to help them and it's something they should have learned, why haven't you taught them that before so they can just do it rather than putting yourself there and getting on that bus? But what I was going to say is then when we talk about this campaign and you go into debriefs and you break stuff down and you figure stuff out, it becomes quite complex. And the goal is not to make it complicated. But the last thing I'd probably share is to recognize that when it comes to the Olympic Games or any major event, your job, if anyone working with them, is about not making it complex. It's actually bringing it back down to just, hey, these are just the real basic stuff that you need to remember. And remembering if people are really nervous, they're not going to take on board too much. So it doesn't work well in that space to be throwing a whole lot of info at athletes. It has to be, you did all the work back there, just trust your preparation and it will come out. And so I draw a little graph that I show people about what phase we should be in and what conversations are appropriate. So yeah, very little analysis or in-depth stuff like around the delivery phase. It's very simple, and people learn routines over time that lead them into that right mental space and performance space, and they just follow those routines. So they're like the lights on the side of a runway when a plane's coming in that guides you into your performance. And they rehearse that in World Cups, World Championships, and then in the Olympics where it's more amplified, or the World Champs and other sports, then they can still use that and adapt it within there, and it'll just guide them into, I just follow these steps, and that's right. Yeah. These are the three things in my sport that leads to winning. I'll do these.
Able to click into that business as usual mode.
Correct.
Almost subconsciously.
Yeah, in a very unusual environment. Yeah, they can something that they can cling to. Oh yeah, it's 8 a.m. This is when I should be eating my breakfast. And I'm just going to eat the same. Like you may have remember that Eva Swindell was talking about taking their Weet-Bix to the Olympic Games with them. So they were like, we normally have Weet-Bix for breakfast. We're going to do it here. We're not going to go to the food hall in our case. We're just going to.
Yeah. Yep. And just lastly, to draw a parallel, you're talking about simplicity, guys, as part, your role is perhaps not in the campaign planning space, but in the and you are in the planning space, and and we have this process to simplify with the card sort. We start broad and thorough, and we narrow down in order to simplify. And so it's really critical that whatever the athletes have on their action plan as the priorities to focus on, that it's not so many things that they're going to get lost in amongst those things, that those things will get remembered and actioned. So just drawing that parallel for you. But yeah, I think we're out of time, David, but it's been a really, really fascinating conversation. I've enjoyed it very much. And I think the people on the call would agree that it's been massively insightful, and there'll be a whole lot of other people who are going to watch this in delayed time as well. So just thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that you're volunteering in amongst a number of balls that you're juggling and corporate commitments. So we just really appreciate you volunteering to give back to us as a group and to the next generation and the future of New Zealand athletes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. thank you, everyone, and all the best with the work you're doing with these young people. It's awesome that I believe you're volunteering your time for that too. So
yes, they are.
Helping people become great, great people. So awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Bye-bye.